And welcome to Breaking the Silence on the Sisterhood Paradox. My name's Carmen Braidwood, and for the next 30 minutes, I'm going to be joined by organisational psychologist and author Vanessa Vershaw in the studio here. Hi, Vanessa.
Hi, Carmen. Thanks for having me on the show this afternoon. I'm so excited to be here to talk about all things Sisterhood Paradox.
Well, we should be talking about it. You know, this is the reason we've pulled this event together, and I'm showing you the book now on screen if you're watching this. Congratulations on the book, by the way.
Thanks, Carmen. Thanks.
The Sisterhood Paradox, chances are you might have engaged with it by buying the book already. You might have it in your hot hands and want to have a chat with us. Vanessa put it together for pretty good reasons, including that there is a problem. There is a problem, Vanessa. We can't spend today. We've only got half an hour. We can't spend today and this next, 29 minutes and 30 seconds deciding whether or not women are nasty to each other. The proof is there. And we have the proof that it is holding us back. So we're not going to worry about that today, right? But if you're watching right now and you have experiences and you have questions for Vanessa, use this half hour to throw those into the chat box. And so we've already heard from Donna, who's watching, Maria's watching. There you go, Vanessa. You can see
lovely.
the people tuning in right now on our live stream here on StreamYard, or you may be watching on one of the social media platforms that we're sending this out to. LinkedIn right now, Facebook as well. Your comments there will also make them up onto the screen. So if you have anything you want to chip in and weigh in this conversation, and specifically we're talking about female aggression at work, and that is the title of the book, Vanessa. How's launch time been treating you?
Oh, it's been fantastic. The response has been overwhelming and no tomatoes being thrown. So that's always a good sign when you write a book like this that is absolutely terrifying to get out there, to see that the response has been incredibly positive thus far. So I'm really pleased with how it's all going.
Vanessa, that brings me to our rules of engagement today quite nicely, doesn't it? Let's keep this conversation constructive. It is a controversial one, though.
It is, yeah.
10 years ago, you released this book the first time, and you went with a more controversial title, Bitch Fight, which maybe some people felt took us back a bit too far. But you wanted to make the point that the sisterhood that's supposed to be all about, hey, let's all do this together, let's lift each other up, ain't really sisterhooding right now. And instead, the way that it was described by Susan Mousehart, which I love, at a women media conference, we're more like a bucket of crabs clawing each other and pulling the top one back down. You'd have to worry about women getting to the top.
Yeah, you would. And it's a massive issue. So glad to be talking about this with you today.
Why write this book? Not once, but twice.
Yeah, I mean, thank you. What an absolutely fantastic question. I mean, I need to start to go back in 2016. Yeah. So a couple of things were going on. We just kind of started putting the spotlight on gender equality and women at work and realizing that, Houston, we have a problem. And I started to read all the literature and saw that nowhere in there was anybody talking about women how they treat each other at work.
Yeah.
So that was a big issue for me because anecdotally and in my practice, I kept coming up against incidences of women really being horrible to each other at work, with some tragic circumstances, actually, which I won't get into on today, but that was part of the impetus. And the second part for me is I just found out that I was pregnant with a beautiful little girl, and I'm thinking about the world that I want to live in. I'm thinking about her going into the working world, and I'm actually getting stressed, wondering how it's going to be for her. So that's kind of what launched the book the first time, feeling like I had to kind of bring it to the attention. And why release it again, which is your question? Two big issues, really. The first being that data came out from the World Economic Forum looking at how far we've advanced gender equality globally and in Australia.
Yep.
Globally, we've advanced by 1%.
One.
What? 1%.
Gloria Steinem and burning bras, that's all.
Since 2016.
What?
1%. So I'm looking at that and it's great that there's so much attention on it. It's great that we're talking about it. It's great that there are all these women's events, all kinds of things going on. But you know what? Nothing is changing. And so I went back and had a look at the reasons why not. And again, women on women at work was not mentioned.
Well, this is the data, right? And you share this in the book. And I think for anyone who might be sitting there, even though I told you not to, who might be sitting there going, oh, hang on, all the women I've worked with are great.
Yeah.
You know, we really look after each other and it's fine. And, you know, maybe that has been my experience since I become a businesswoman. But I'll tell you, as a woman in media, it wasn't my experience. And it's backed up by things like this. Women bully other women 80% of the time.
Yeah.
Women who report to women experience a greater frequency of bullying, abuse, and job sabotage. And as you're pointing out, in the 10 years since you first looked at this topic, we're just not getting any better. And in spite of the fact that we know that when you have 30% women on boards, for example, this is the data you shared on the World Economic Forum with Dr. Sandy Chong.
Yeah.
We know that when you get that 30% threshold happening, you've got 55% increase in sales, which is still pretty bloody good, and 63% increase in invested capital. So why are the organizations not playing ball when you've got things like that as hard data saying it works?
Look, there's a couple of reasons. It is quite, as they say on Facebook, it's complicated to
it
describe
is.
the relationship. It's a very complicated psychology as well. And there's a couple of things going on. One, typically women bullying women are invisible. So the tactics that are used are not as obvious.
Yeah.
Okay. And so it's very hard if you can't identify what it looks like to be able to do something about it. Look, and so much so that it's often called the pink elephant in the room.
I love
pink elephant being that a lot of women who experience workplace bullying by other women actually start to doubt whether it's really happening. So it's almost like this idea that they're hallucinating, which is why they call it the pink elephant.
I love it.
Because it's so under the radar a lot of the time. And so that's what's created some of the issues around talking about it. If you can't identify it, you can't face it, you can't change it. So there it is.
Do you think one of the reasons we can't identify it as women is that it's just always been like that? Is that our behaviours are like this at school, then we get into the workplace, or we have adult friendships with other women, and sadly these are just the ways that women tend to engage. So let's maybe see if we can pinpoint the behaviours. What are behaviours that are bullying? You know, I feel like it's like year 3 again and we have to learn what bullying is, but what does it really look like?
Yeah, and I love that question because unfortunately the word bullying has been used as an umbrella term,
Hasn't it?
to describe every type of workplace aggression.
Yeah.
They're not all created equal. If somebody eyeballs you or rolls an eye at you or calls you a nasty name, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's bullying. So bullying is very intentional, it's specific, and it's repeated over time. So it's somebody literally saying, I'm going to go after that woman for whatever reason, and I'm going to go after her time and time and time again. And it's different tactics. It's things like gaslighting, white-anting, but it has become more sophisticated over the last decade.
Oh, no, really? I've been out of work nearly a decade. Don't tell me that. What are they doing now?
So it's translated now into something called mobbing.
Oh.
Okay, which is the female bully actually recruits others to do the bullying for her so that, like Teflon, nothing sticks. So the others get the rap for it and the woman walks away unscathed. And the other really big one with the advent of technology is obviously cyberbullying. Now, what's really interesting about cyberbullying is we've gone from invisible tactics or indirect tactics to women becoming more brazen. Take cyber trolling, cyberbullying, calling people out in the media. So it's actually reached a point where it's become almost a bit of an epidemic.
It sounds like it. And I recall a story that you write about in the Sisterhood Paradox involving Catherine at Kudos.
Yes.
Who, a made-up scenario in terms of names and details, but certainly not a false scenario, I should say, in terms of what happened to this woman. One of the ways that she was sabotaged was through rumour spreading, if you like, by her female mentor.
Yeah, that's a really big one as well. So rumours typically regarding either perceived competence.
Yeah.
So saying that somebody is not competent and spreading rumours about inefficiencies and things like that.
Yep.
The other one is about somebody's sexual habits.
Wow.
And I don't want to use the term here, but it's a form of shaming, let's say, which basically spreads the rumor that the person is promiscuous.
Yeah.
And then the other one, and again, an evolution over the last 10 years, is fat shaming.
Mm.
Fat shaming of other women at work
Yeah.
has become a thing.
What?
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
thought we were going the other direction.
No, not at all. I think probably too, Carmen, one of the most harrowing examples
Yeah.
that I heard in doing all the research that I did for this new edition was hearing about a GM at an oil and gas company who actually asked his executive assistant to recruit for a new PA
Yeah.
and to put the 6 PAs going for the job through a series of grueling tasks and trials, and to run it like a Hunger Games scenario where only the person who survived the trials and tribulations of the day got offered the position at the end of it. And this is in Perth, and it is really happening. This is not a made up or fictitious story.
Yeah.
This is happening right here, right now.
So we can really start to understand why you felt compelled to rebadge it, to add new information into this book and bring it into 2025 as you have done. Are you still getting the same kind of backlash, from those who want to who say things like, "Well, this is only going to push us backward"? Like, what's your response to women who say we need to kind of just act like this isn't happening and focus on the positives?
I love that, because when a woman says that, it's typically somebody who hasn't actually gone through it
Yeah.
or hasn't known somebody who's experienced it. And so it's coming from a place of, look, ignorance, honestly. I haven't been through it myself. It's not a lived experience. So how could it possibly be happening? But look, the research doesn't lie. And a big part for me of re-releasing this book was making sure that I could back it up.
Yeah.
And that it wasn't just, oh, this is just Vanessa, seeing quite a high frequency of women presenting with these issues that they've got to work through at work.
Mm.
This is actually completely data backed. And so when you read the book, if you have a chance,
Mm.
have a look at everything that I've talked about that is actually rooted in strong, robust evidence, including some really interesting statistics about, shamefully, Australia leading the way in terms of being the number one country with the highest rate of bullying in schools,
Yeah, right.
which is where a lot of this began. And it
Yeah.
actually starts early, honestly. So I believe there's a correlation between what's happening in our schools
Yes.
and actually what's happening in the workplace. And I would like some researchers to actually prove it, because we've got some sketchy data which links the two.
Yeah.
But if you have a look at the trends, you could make a pretty plausible assumption or hypothesis
Yeah.
that there might be a very strong link, which is what I'm proposing.
What do you think? If you're watching right now on the live stream or one of our social media platforms right now, your comments will come through to us in the studio through until 4:30 this afternoon, Australian Western Standard Time. But I know because of Vanessa's vast worldwide audience, this is indeed a global conversation. So wherever you are, what are you seeing? I want to hear more also from Vanessa about why it is us as women who say we haven't experienced it, can't even recognize in ourselves when maybe we're the bully. All right, things like that. So have a think about these kinds of questions and jot those into the comments, and we will bring them up on the screen. Robbie's doing some moderating as we speak of the questions coming through. Vanessa, we want to make the most of this time. So when a woman maybe does sort of think, okay, honest truth, can't say I've ever experienced that. I mean, I'll give you my example. I, at one point in my career, thought, no, I've never experienced that. And I thought back on that. I'm like, well, that's because you work in a career where you were typically the only woman in the room. So it was literally impossible for me to encounter aggression from another female because the industry did not support many women working side by side. Is that part of it?
Oh, it's definitely. And look, I want to be really clear. I don't believe that women are inherently mean to one another. It's not what I believe or the scenario that I've put in the book. But because it's something that we don't understand, because it's something that is often so indirect and we can't identify it, it's very hard to connect with what we don't understand. What I will say also, Carmen, though, is that organisations set up women to be pitted against one another.
You got it.
Yeah. And it's because there are so few of us at the top, which is why I wrote the book. How do we change the representation of women at the top and get more women into driving seats? Because inherently, as human animals, in a scarcity environment, what's going to happen unconsciously and consciously, we're going to be forced to compete. And a lot of times I'll be coaching a woman or working with a woman and she won't even be aware that she's doing this thing. So, for example, the big one that really throws some women is the silent treatment.
Oh, yeah.
The silent treatment or ghosting someone is never an option.
Yeah.
Psychologically, it is traumatic and it is a real insidious form of bullying.
Yeah.
You know, so choose a different approach. If you're the person that doesn't want to deal with the conflict, that chooses the silent treatment or ghosting another person, man or woman, don't go there. Always be respectful and be kind and try to have a conversation much like you would want to have so that you don't become the very person that you're trying to get away from.
The other thing we hear a lot about from women in these conversations, certainly in the post we did in the lead up to this event, was the woman who does make it to the top, the single board member, the single member of the executive or the CEO who feels like women on the way up because of this scarcity mentality need to have that jumping through ropes experience, a bit like you talked about with that oil and gas company. I don't know which one it was, the company here in WA who are just holding women to such a high standard, almost as if to say, well, I had to do it that way, so you better as well. Why do we do this to each other?
It's really interesting. I mean, this is almost an example of what we call the double bind effect.
Okay.
And so that is, and I'll put this out there, and some of you might find this controversial, but just go with me. You know, why should we expect other women to help us just because they've made it? And that's not what I'm proposing. What I'm proposing in the book is to say, let's manage our expectations of other women. Not every woman is going to help you, but don't do the reverse. If you are a woman who's made it, don't be nasty to your sisters. You know, we don't expect that you should help if you don't want to. It's a choice that you need to make. Although, my God, we really need you to.
Be nice.
It would be nice.
Yep.
But just don't crap on the women on the way that are on the way up. You know,
Love that.
I think that's really the delineation that I want to make.
That's tricky, isn't it? As a woman who achieves a certain level of success, that in itself can be difficult. And let's not forget that often women are doing this with a greater mental load in the home or in their marriage. You know, there's all of these other things that they are doing on top of that, that when you start to go, I have to add mentoring into the mix as well, it can feel too much. So absolutely get that. And I much like and you do write this in the book, we don't expect all men to be mentors. So why do we expect all women at the top to suddenly be mentors? That's not fair, is it?
I don't think so. And that's my point in the book. I think we have to manage our expectations. On the one hand, it's having the expectation that just because she's a woman and she's made it, she should help us. Okay, that's the first one. The second one is, you know, there is this view that every woman is kind and compassionate and empathic and soft and fluffy. And we're not.
And we don't all like pink.
You know, I like we don't all like pink.
You like pink. It makes good branding for the book and for cupcakes on International Women's Day. But we don't all like pink.
No, we don't all like pink. And so I think there is a really big part around, as a female, managing your expectation about the type of relationship you want to have with another woman, identifying whether she's for you as well, because not everybody's going to be cut out. Because the other big part of this, Carmen, and this is really, really important for everybody listening, is when a woman hurts another woman, it takes a long time to recover. Most of the women that I've stood alongside over the years that have been the brunt or the target of a bully or have had a negative experience are often being treated for post-traumatic stress disorder. It hurts more when it's from another woman. And so what I'm trying to do here is say, so that you don't get hurt, is there a part of your expectation that maybe needs to be managed? Let's take a more clinical view. And once we do that, then we can start to remove the emotion from the situation that we're confronted with and actually deal with it a little more clinically so that we can get to the other side in one piece.
And on that, you write some fantastic literature in the book about how we can navigate our careers better, you know, by learning the language, or as often I like to say to my friends, you know, operate within the paradigm as it is. Yes, it's unfair at times. Yes, it's a little different for women than it is for men, simply because of some of our innate chemistry, that just the way we do things are a bit different, or our experience to date might have been a bit different. But if we all do these things, just like say men have, and I'm not saying change your behaviors to be masculine or be
Not at all.
manly, but instead doing things like making our value visible, instead of waiting in the fringes, waiting in the background, waiting for someone to recognize your talent because you've been busting your ass, working more than everybody else and saying yes to every volunteer opportunity. Instead of waiting for recognition, actually telling people about it.
Well, I think that's so important. And there are certain ways that women need to be aware of that can work for and against them.
This is where I think I fall foul sometimes, because we
Okay.
can get a little bit too, hey, look at me, and people don't like that.
Well, they don't coming from a woman. And that's why a lot of women won't play, you see.
Yeah.
Because they're worried that they're going to come across as, self-promoting, God forbid we should come across as ambitious.
Oh.
If you're ambitious, you're seen as aggressive.
Yeah.
And so one of the things I talk about in the book is I'm trying to help women understand how to play differently at work. And some of you may be hearing the word play and saying, oh my God, what do I want to become, a political animal? It's not for me. You know what, everybody? You have to learn how to influence. And when you do it ethically, it can really catapult you in terms of the opportunities that are provided to you as a female. For example, you talked about making value visible.
Yeah.
What does that actually mean? It means you need to know and be able to articulate the value that you bring to the workplace. You
Yeah.
need to be able to tell people what that looks like.
Yeah.
If you can't, you will get discounted.
Yeah.
And a prime example of Elon Musk, great story. Elon Musk, with his secretary of 12 years, started with him from the get-go before he was rich and kooky, started there.
Probably just kooky.
Asked him for a pay rise. And he said, why should I give you a pay rise? And she said, well, because I've been working with you for 12 years. And he said, look, what I'm going to do, I'm going to pay for you to go on all expenses holiday for a week with your family. I'm going to do your job. And when you come back, we're going to have this conversation again. So what do you think happened?
He noticed that she wasn't bringing as much value as she said.
He did a job for a week. She came back. He asked her again, what is it that you do for me? What is the value that you create? She couldn't answer. He'd done her job for a week and she got the royal chop.
Yeah, right.
We've got to be able to articulate our unique value proposition and the unique way in which we deliver our services and our skills to the organisation we serve. And that is so important and ties into your work, Carmen.
Doesn't it? And it needs to be in their language. As I'm
100%.
always saying to anybody, man, woman or child, who wants to be visible, who wants to get a story out there, you need to think about your audience. Who's the audience?
That's right.
And how are they going to receive this? So if your audience is kooky Elon Musk, then that's your audience. No point belly aching that he hasn't noticed you for the last 12 years. Learn how to explain it in his language.
Yeah, so important.
Yeah, or her language. If the case may be that you're navigating a difficult relationship with a female boss, same deal. Right, we're getting some quite detailed shares in the commentary, which we'll have a look at here. A tough work story to share. Thank you, Donna. I went the extra mile for a colleague struggling with mental health issues, offering extensive support and training to keep her from being fired. My kindness was met with complete betrayal. She undermined me in meetings, leading to my dismissal, and then took my job. Oh, Vanessa, I feel like you know an awful lot about this. It was a truly shocking and painful experience, amplified by subsequent bullying. It reminds me that while helping others is important, sometimes you learn the hard way about protecting yourself. What was going on there, would you say?
Look, it's pretty obviously when you've got someone with mental health issues, that's always a red flag for me to tread carefully and be really careful. And I think in this instance, what I'd say to you is, when you start to see the behaviours, don't explain them away. Because I would say that you would have seen some of these behaviours from that individual before you actually got let go, right? Or before you lost your role. And it's so normal for us women to say, oh, it's not really happening, or she's going through a tough time, she doesn't really mean it. And I think it's one of those things where you've got to face reality as it is, not as you wish it to be. You've got to look at the evidence that's telling you that there's a problem and see the writing on the wall and actually remove yourself. Save yourself. Don't feel guilty about removing yourself from a relationship or a situation that is actually causing you harm. And so telltale signs are, for example, I'm feeling stressed about seeing this woman. I'm feeling dread. I'm not feeling supported. I know there's something wrong, but I'm not listening to my intuition, which is screaming really loud in my head that there's a problem. The other thing I'd say to you, Donna, is, this is always more complicated when you're in the work scenario, but if you don't have a working environment where you don't feel safe to actually report this or have these conversations, then that's a really tough situation to be in. And so it's probably an indication that it might not be the environment for you anyway. Because if you don't have the psychological safety to get that support, where are you going to go? Where are you going to go? It's a really good indication that it's time to make a change. And this is often the issue, is we wait until the end, until we've got no energy left to give and we're on our knees before we take action to leave. And I want to acknowledge too that for some women that's not always possible, because if you're in a hand-to-mouth situation, but what I would say is, I think for all women listening, we have to get quicker at recognising the signs and that there's a problem, and figure out what the possible strategies and solutions are, so that we don't lose ourselves in the process and actually become the sacrificial lamb or the person that gets the damage done to them psychologically and then spend years in therapy, which many of us have to go through after these types of experiences, me included. So,
Vanessa, thank you. And thank you, Donna, for that share and that question. Keep them coming through. We've got a couple of minutes left to answer any questions you would like to put into the chat. One of those that comes up an awful lot, Vanessa, around CEOs, around executives is, they're a psychopath. Let's get psychological on this. What's the difference between psychopathic behaviour and bullying?
Yeah, so the big one is, it's really interesting. So psychopaths are normally more prevalent to bullying.
Yeah.
So chances are, if you have a bully that's consistent, that's targeted, that's intentional, they're going to have levels of psychopathology.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's typically something that I would say to you. And so with psychopathology, it's a very hard one to navigate, particularly if they're in a position of power.
Yep.
It means somebody has put them there and is okay with it. Are you hearing me?
Okay, so it's coming from right at the top.
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
If they've been put in role, it means that you have got bigger issues, okay? And so I would say to you, run for the hills. If you have somebody like, it's not worth it. It's not worth it. You will get caught in the crossfire, and it'll be you, most likely, that'll end up a puddle on the carpet. So protect yourself, please.
I love these protectionist measures, right? And that's what I'm getting coming through reading the whole book, is there are strategies in there that are just going to help us recognize it, instead of maybe, like we heard earlier with Donna's example, falling for that. Okay, I found a friend at work and I'm sharing vulnerably with them, when really I should have been looking for the official channels within the organisation to do that. That's a red flag, which a lot of us will miss.
Yeah, and on that one, I always say to my clients, they come to me and they talk to me about negative experiences that they're having with women or men at work. And here's what I'll say to everyone listening. If somebody shows you who they are, believe them. All right? You don't need any more than that. You got the goods. Give them 5 goes. That's my rule of thumb. If you get 5 examples of somebody who is heinous, man or woman, don't rationalize it. That is who they are. Stop and figure out your strategy. But I'm sure you don't want them in your life if you can get away with it, right?
Yeah. And that's it, finding the appropriate way to extract yourself, like you say, dependent on the necessities of life.
Yeah.
And the other channels you've got to formally have that conversation. Men.
Yeah.
Men in this whole conversation.
Yeah.
I know you've had men reach out to you since the Sisterhood Paradox came out, saying, I was bullied by a woman. When are you going to tell my story?
Yeah. Yeah. And it's really interesting. And this may surprise our audience today. The psychological damage on men of being bullied by a woman is just as horrific.
Okay.
I have had 2 very senior CEOs of major, I'm talking billion-dollar plus organizations, in my arms at Odyssey on the deck, okay, shuddering and crying and wondering when we are going to start talking about this. So it is, and I think it goes back to the expectations around women.
Yes.
They don't expect it either, right?
Yes.
And so it's one of those things where both men and women don't feel confident generally in their ability to deal with these things. And this is what the book gives you. It talks you through all the scenarios,
Mhm.
how not to rationalize it, but actually how to get through it, how to build your case if you need to. And I had an extraordinary leader talk me through her process, a very public bullying, to actually gain the clinical approach she needed to actually take this person to court
Wow.
and win. Win.
Yeah.
But look, it took every ounce of strength, and she had to treat that relationship like a lawyer preparing for trial. But to get to that mental state, that place of strength, she had to do the work first.
And that, I think, is what's so practical about this book. You know, alongside things like making your value visible, you talk about managing your career.
Yeah.
Set the terms.
Yeah.
Own it. Command respect.
Yeah.
You know, doing these things, I think, are very empowering for all of us. And empowering is a loaded word these days with women. You know, we do say give them pink cupcakes, they're suddenly empowered.
Please. Oh, my
right?
God. Bath.
Exactly.
The cupcakes have gone stale, girls.
Give
They've
them
gone
leadership
stale.
training.
Give them leadership, for God's sake.
Yeah, and take the leadership training. Put your hand up for it. You know, I think there's just not enough of us who are willing to make ourselves so visible and so vulnerable by saying, yes, I'd like to do that. You know, how do we implore the woman watching right now who is holding back, who is saying, I'm not quite ready for that yet? You know, you're the organizational psychologist in the room. How do we give her the power to say, yes, please?
You know, what are you waiting for is the first thing I'd say. If you don't take the steering wheel of your own life and drive it in the direction that you want to go in, it will not happen. Okay? We can't blame anybody else. We have to take charge of our careers. And a big strategy that I always talk about, and I know we're running out of time, mentoring is not enough. Okay? What about sponsorship? What about actively sponsoring or getting sponsors that talk about you when you're not in the room? There's a whole raft of different things that you can do so you don't have to speak about yourself to actually get a Guernsey at the table. And so really I would encourage all of you to think, what do I want to be when I grow up? What does that dream life plan look like in terms of career as well? And actually put strategically, much like you do a business strategy, build your career strategy to get to that end game and figure out the steps that you need to get there. And I know we've run out of time, but everything is in the book. And I'm really happy to take questions from people. If you want to reach out and you're wanting further clarification around anything that I've put in the book about how to create that roadmap, just ask me. I'm here.
Yeah, that's the things we need, isn't it? Those practical strategies.
Practical.
I like to think of it as reputation management. I mean, a corporation will manage their reputation through the content
You have
they
to as
share.
well.
You've got to do it too.
You do. And who you associate with is just as important.
Yeah.
So if you're associated with somebody who's bullying, if you're associated with a quarrel or a kerfuffle, what's going to happen? You're going to be tarnished with the same brush. So be really, really careful about that as well.
It's a wake-up call.
Wake up call.
A call to arms, if you like, as well. The Sisterhood Paradox, available now. VanessaVershaw.com is one place to find it. Give it a Google if you haven't already got a copy. And as Vanessa says, share those conversations. This is about constructive steps moving forward on a very taboo topic. No one's lying about that today, but it is the truth. The data is there, and we've got some really good practical strategies in the book. Vanessa Vershaw, thank you.
Thanks so much, Carmen. What a great conversation. And look, I hope everybody listening does feel empowered by today, because that is the point. We've got to take action and create the life that we dream of.
All
And
right.
it's all within reach.
It absolutely is. It feels achievable reading this. So thank you for putting it out there as well. And thanks for your time today. Thank you for watching wherever you may be around the world, tuning into our live stream today. I've been Carmen Braidwood. I will still be Carmen Braidwood in another couple of minutes when this wraps up. Keep the conversations going in the comments. Take care.